Two and a Half Admins, episode 212. I'm Joe.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Alan.
And here we are again. Rogue WHOIS server gives researcher superpowers no one should ever have.
Yeah, I was surprised by this one because I didn't think WHOIS was quite that critical to the infrastructure of the internet, but it turns out not everybody is good at their job. So what happened here was the people that run the .mobi, M-O-B-I, top-level domain, decided to change their WHOIS server. I'm guessing in the past for reasons of diversity and just the fact that the kind of newfangled TLDs weren't necessarily that well supported at first, they ran their WHOIS server as whois.mobiregistry.net. And eventually they decided our domain is well supported enough now, we'll just move to whois.nic.mobi. But then after a while, they just let the old .mobiregistry.net domain expire. And while walking around at DEF CON, somebody realized this and bought the domain and set up their own WHOIS server.
Which you would think wouldn't be a problem, right?
Yes, because the WHOIS is just a bunch of text you get back when you look up a domain. It's informational. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's not going to let you get a Let's Encrypt certificate or anything because that requires DNS. And WHOIS doesn't actually control DNS. At least, that's what I thought.
Unfortunately, as it turns out, public certificate providers frequently check WHOIS information to decide whether or not they should issue a cert to you. And when our researcher decided to ask for a certificate signing request for Microsoft.mobi, he promptly got an email back from GlobalSign. Here is your perfectly valid certificate for a domain that you have absolutely no rights to because you control the WHOIS server that we created to find out whether you had the rights to it or not.
Yeah, so there's one more step in there. So what the GlobalSign does is they do the WHOIS, get the email address from the WHOIS, and send that email address a link. And only clicking that link will then say, okay, you control that domain, we'll create the certificate for you. But because this was a rogue WHOIS server in place of the real one, they were able to make the email address return for every domain.mobi to be whois@watchtower.com, which was their company. And so every domain they could look up, they would get that email and be able to do it. I don't know why that type of verification is still an option.
Yeah, because you look at Let's Encrypt, you need the actual domain that you're getting the cert for.
Well, and even in the screenshot here of GlobalSign, they have the option to do DNS verification, or the other one that Let's Encrypt offers, the HTTP verification, where you have to put a file on a website. And you by putting the file there, you can prove that you have control of the website. But they just apparently also offer this option of, we'll look up the admin email on the WHOIS and do that. It's like, how many domains does that even work for? Like most domains default to having some kind of WHOIS privacy now and have a kind of a gibberish email address anyway.
It turns out the more you try to make things convenient and deal with every possible way that a human might want to process a request, rather than saying this is the way that requests go through these channels and the humans will have to comply, the more you do that, the more likelihood that you've opened up something that you didn't really think about that turns your security into absolute Swiss cheese, which is exactly what happened here.
But this only affected the .mobi TLD. But I expect this SSL provider is going to get spanked slightly by the CAB forum because there's got to be a better way to do this. But I also think that this is not the only TLS provider that offers this option. So I don't think it's necessarily GlobalSign's the only people that would have fallen for this.
I also very strongly doubt this is GlobalSign specific. I think there are a lot of certificate providers out there that will do exactly this, that will look up information off of a WHOIS server and send an email verification based on that. I mean, I'm pretty sure my own provider has that option.
You say fall for it, Alan. There's no falling for it. It's all automated, right?
Yeah, I guess the thing that I just find interesting there is so many WHOIS servers have rate limits and so on because they used to get scraped for spam so bad that I'm surprised it's even remotely reliable for the TLS provider to be able to even get the results of a WHOIS, at the volume that they might have to do it.
It probably isn't reliable for that anymore, and very few customers are probably using it that way anymore, but that is probably a feature that has been around for 20 plus years, and who bothers closing off old crusty features? No, just leave them around. Somebody might be using it. We might get a phone call if we disable that feature.
But I guess at the same time, I can see that if you're not a sysadmin type person, getting an email and clicking a link is a lot easier than making a DNS record.
If you're not a sysadmin type person, why are you messing around with SSL certs?
Well, you have a website, and that's what your web provider told you to do. Go here, buy this thing, and send us this file.
If you have your own website, you either have a sysadmin or you are a sysadmin. Now, in either case, it might be a terrible one, but there's a sysadmin involved.
It might be me.
Like I said.
Yeah, and then they go on to say that expired domains like this aren't the only way things like this can happen, right? People have had S3 buckets that they deleted, and someone was managed to recreate one with the same name, and then stuff would be pointed at that and things like that. Or I actually got hit something like this years ago, where we had a bunch of DNS servers for our domain. And so we had the glue records that point to that. And at some point, we canceled the server with a hosting provider and moved to a different hosting provider. But we didn't update the glue records. We updated the DNS to say, NS3 is actually over here now, but forgot to update the glue records. And that was fine, because for a long time, that IP address didn't go anywhere or didn't run a DNS server, so lookups didn't have a problem. But one day, somebody ended up with that IP address at that old hosting provider and stood up a DNS server and started giving, NX domain, or eventually actually false results for our domain, causing like a third of our DNS queries to go to some random DNS server that wasn't ours, giving out bogus results. And it's like, I understand DNSSEC now, or the desire for it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it occurs to me that WHOIS is not an encrypted protocol. That's just plain text going over the wire, is it not?
Correct. There's no verification that the WHOIS server you're talking to is a legitimate one, right? If WHOIS was over TLS, they'd have to have a certificate that said that, yes, we actually are the .mobi people. Although if they bought the domain, they would be able to get such a certificate, so it wouldn't have helped there.
My point here is that if you're querying an external WHOIS server over the internet, how reliable is that data you're getting back? Because literally anybody in between you and a server halfway across the world can monkey with those packets and you'd never know.
Yeah, if you could man in the middle of one of these certificate authorities, you could munge the WHOIS results on them.
Windows 11 users still living in the past face forced update, like it or not.
Now, the good news here is that we are actually talking about people who are already on Windows 11. We're not talking about additional things rushing people who are still on Windows 10 onto 11, although Windows 10 folks, your time is very sharply limited and you need to work on that. What we're talking about here is users of Windows 11, 21H2, and 22H2. Those are the releases in the second half of 2021 and the second half of 2022 being forcibly upgraded to 23H2, which was the release from the tail end of last year. And let me digress for a second and just say that although I am glad that Microsoft is using years in their version numbers now, the way they went about it sucks. It is so hard to get things like 22H1 and 23H2 like off the tongue properly, to say it right, to know what you said, know what you meant. Sucks.
Yeah, so basically the versions of Windows 11 that are going end of life, as they approach that end of life, Microsoft's going to basically force people running them to upgrade to the newer version instead of just pleading with them like they have until now and as they did with previous versions of Windows.
This is not going to be a real big deal for most people. The majority of Windows users, even in a business setting, they don't really see or notice the difference between point releases of the same version of Windows. You can have some issues with some applications, relatively rarely. You can have some visual changes that some users might object to, but this is all really pretty minor stuff. And if you are in that subset of users, well, you need to find a way to get onto, one of the LTSC Windows 11 releases, which those do not auto-update themselves. As any Windows 11 machines that are enrolled in, IT management, it will not be affected by this change. However, if you are just using your own I installed it myself version, even if it's Windows 11 Enterprise, you will be subject to these changes.
So are you saying that if it's managed by Active Directory, then it's not going to be forced to upgrade?
I am not just saying Active Directory. We're talking about a step much further corporate than that. We're talking about actual centralized deployment and management where you've got centrally managed images that you can deploy over the network to individual machines. There's a whole system for that. And if you're using that system, which I believe is Intune, I can't remember for sure, then you will not be subject to this. This is only for what Microsoft refers to as unmanaged systems, which kind of makes my teeth bristle because I unmanage several hundred systems myself, but there you have it.
So how do we feel about forced upgrades like this? I mean, as a Linux user, it just feels antithetical to me. Like, you can't force me to upgrade. Like, no, it's my computer. But I suppose if you are in the Windows world, then you're kind of used to it, maybe.
Windows really kind of already owns you to a greater degree than that and makes it clear to a greater degree than that. Honestly, it's not really any different from a rolling release. There's a million Linux rolling release distros out there that update themselves all the time, period, and you get no control over that. You just get whatever's in the repos. I mean, sure, you can individually pick and choose different things, but you can't really freeze the system and get updates. You're either updated or you're not.
Yeah.
I don't really see how it's any different than that. It's a rolling release that, I don't know, maybe it's square so it doesn't roll very evenly.
I can see the value to the public of this, of forcing lots of old Windows machines to go to a newer version and not sit there open with a bunch of vulnerabilities. And I see the value to Microsoft of like, oh, we only have to issue future updates for 2-point releases instead of 4-point releases. You know, when we looked at some of the recent bugs they had with IPv6 and so on, and looked at all the different version of Windows that they had to release the fix for, including some out of support ones that they still have extended support for if you pay enough money and so on. I can see why they would want to get the number of those down instead of having to make and test different versions of that patch for 27 different versions of Windows if they can get it down to 20 versions. You know, Microsoft doesn't want to end up in a CrowdStrike situation where they issue an update that bricks all these boxes and it's, you know, supposed to be a critical security update.
I think one real key sticking point here is just the question of how reliable are these in-place point version updates? Because in the past, upgrading Windows from one version to another very frequently, very catastrophically did not work. And even when it did work, if you remember, like, you know, back in the days of upgrading in place from, say, 2000 to XP or even XP Home to XP Pro, at best you'd be left with a system that worked, but it was only running about half as fast as it should be. Now, that hasn't been the case for a long time now. Basically, beginning with, I would say, the 7 to 10 transition, Microsoft pretty much got it all in one sock. Once we're talking about the upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 10 or any of the ones since then, I'd say I see considerably fewer than 5% failure rate, and none of them have been catastrophic. Like, the upgrade might not work, but if it doesn't work, it either automatically rolls itself back or you can yourself just roll it back. And that rollback process now, these days, essentially always works in my experience. As long as that's the case, this kind of forced upgrade to new point versions, I don't really see as a big deal. I don't see it as, honestly, any different than automatic Windows updates in the first place. I mean, it's still a case of, look, software changes, software evolves, new compromises are found, new vulnerabilities are being exploited. It's a moving target. You can't just keep the exact same stack in your system unmodified forever. So this is not a big thing to worry about. Now, if we were talking about those old days and the really unreliable releases that were very likely to break your system, leave applications not working, maybe leave the whole system not booting, and it was doing that and you had no choice about it, then I would have a major issue. So this is on you, Microsoft. Keep your upgrade process working well.
Well, in general, I look at these updates a little more like the service packs they used to have. Like, remember with XP, with Service Pack 1 and Service Pack 2, that actually were decent quality upgrades and didn't have the same baggage as a version change upgrade, you know, going from XP to something or from something to XP. And, you know, most of these do normally roll out to people via the Windows Update model and don't have a lot of trouble. But I agree with Jim that, especially if they're going to force this, it has to work awfully damn smoothly. But to back that up, it does seem like, you know, everybody who's optionally or recommendedly installed these updates already has probably surfaced any problems, and Microsoft has fixed them by the time they're doing the last hurrah to get rid of 21H2.
And the majority of the systems I manage are already set to automatically update with those point versions, and I have not seen any issues with those. I mean, I've seen issues with the Windows Update mechanism itself, which sometimes includes those, but like I haven't seen any particular issue with a machine automatically upgrading from one point version to the next. It's fine. It just does its thing.
It was a bit before my time, but service packs, in my mind, are more like the kind of Ubuntu point releases where it's more of a bundling of security updates with a few features.
Kind of. When you go back to the original service packs that Microsoft did, it was because most people didn't have the internet or enough internet to download a new version of the OS. So you'd actually get a service pack like on a CD And it would be all the security updates for like the last year or whatever that you might be missing, and all the new features and fixes that would roll up your OS to a newer version. And those were bigger things and generally were distributed differently because, if you had dial-up, you weren't going to download a 200 megabyte operating system update.
And the features were usually the most important part of Windows service packs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it used to be a really big deal about, like, do you have the latest service pack installed? Because if you don't, the brand new AAA game you just bought won't run.
Yeah, because that service pack probably included the newer version of DirectX or a bunch of other functionality that was required to make things work.
Exactly. With that said, though, I mean, you're not too far off. I think we should be clear what we mean by the Ubuntu point releases, though. I initially misunderstood and thought you were referring to the ephemeral releases, the ones, the every 6-month ones, rather than the long-term support releases.
Interims, they call them.
Yeah, they can call them interim. I'm calling them ephemeral because that's what they are. They're only good for 6 months. They're not very good during those 6 months these days. It's a bunch of beta nonsense. But that's not what we're talking about when we talk about the Ubuntu point releases. We're talking about the difference between, for example, 20.04 when it first releases and 20.04.1, which will typically release about 6 months later. And then you may have a 20.04.2, .3, .4 as like big changes worth, kind of freezing a point in time occur, then, that's basically what winds up defining one of those point releases. A point release will usually mean an upgraded kernel as well as, some upgraded libraries and things that don't just fall in the normal update realm of we're just backporting security fixes and that's it.
Yeah, so with Microsoft, they do it a bit differently. So they have the security updates that come out, and then occasionally they have what they call a quality roll-up, which is a bunch of bug fixes and things that aren't time sensitive. And so they'll issue those on a kind of regular basis. So certain Patch Tuesdays will have a bunch of security patches and a quality roll-up that fixes a bunch of bugs that they found. And then less frequently, they have these kind of service pack-like things, which is actually going to a newer version of the OS, but it's a minor new version, and it doesn't involve the upgrade process you would see going from Windows 10 to Windows 11 or something like that.
But in a way, it kind of is in my mind. It's almost like halfway in between, because Windows 10 was supposed to be like the forever version. I remember the headlines at the time. This is the final version of Windows. And so instead of going from 10 to 11, they would just do these big, effectively point releases. So it's just quite a confusing situation, especially as they then went to 11 when they said they weren't going to.
Well, they haven't quite got to the model where you just pay them every month for the operating system instead of buying it outright. So
Not yet.
Not yet. So we'll see. They did switch the email server to that model. So one thing at a time.
I think the sticking point is because they've set themselves up with the OEMs as their actual customer and not the end users, it makes it a lot more difficult to pull off the subscription dodge. Because how are you going to convince the OEM to keep paying you every month for that operating system for the life of that machine? The OEM's not continuing to get money. They're not going to keep giving you money forever either.
Yeah, and the customer who bought the $300 or $400 laptop isn't going to keep giving you money either.
Well, they might if the laptop showed up not working and they had to enter into the agreement to, get the thing to boot. But we're back into a chicken and egg problem of, what consumers will tolerate and what they won't. And consumers, frankly, will tolerate an awful lot that they shouldn't. But I think that's going to be a step too far for pretty much everybody.
I don't know, Windows 11 pretty much requires you to make a Microsoft account when you open up your new PC as the out-of-the-box experience part.
Yeah, an annoying setup process is quite different from giving you my credit card number and paying you every month.
But it might be that your OEM has included the first year for free, but after that, you're going to have to pay. Otherwise, you can't change your wallpaper and all the stuff they used to do to, Windows Basic.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the OEMs wouldn't need to do that for very long either. It basically, the minute people get accustomed to after a year, I have to pay for it, nobody's going to not buy the laptop that they prefer because it didn't have the year thrown in or whatever. It's very quickly just going to turn into another one of those, well, that's just fact of life. That's just what you have to do.
Yeah, the laptop's $80 cheaper now. We promise.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by people who support us with PayPal and Patreon. Go to 2.5admins.com/support for details of how you can support us too. Patreon supporters have the option to listen to episodes without ads like this. And it's not just this show. There's Late Night Linux for news, discoveries, audience input, and misanthropy. Linux Matters for upbeat family-friendly adventures. Linux After Dark for silly challenges and philosophical debates. Linux Dev Time about developing with and for Linux. Hybrid Cloud Show for everything public and private cloud. And Ask the Hosts for off-topic questions from you. You can even get some episodes a bit early. We've got a lot going on, and it's only possible because of the people who support us. So if you like what we do and can afford it, it would be great if you could support us too at 2.5admins.com/support. Let's do some free consulting then. But first, just a quick thank you to everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. And if you want to send in your questions for Jim and Alan or your feedback, you can email show@2.5admins.com. Another perk of being a patron is you get to skip the queue, which is what Kanuni has done. They write, in episode 170, Alan talked about installing TP-Link Omada with the EAP225 access points in his home on Jim's recommendation. Looking at YouTube videos about the stack, it seemed too complex. I didn't want to mess around with VLANs and ACLs, so I tried TP-Link Deco Mesh instead. The Deco is working well, but I didn't realize that the Deco app can manipulate the mesh from anywhere in the world, with no way to disable remote access and no 2FA option either. Worse yet, TP-Link cautions the impact of long-time management without access to the TP-Link cloud has not been tested and lacks supporting data. So just firewalling the mesh points off from TP-Link's cloud doesn't look like a great fit either. As a result, I've circled back to the Omada stack Jim and Alan originally recommended, and I wanted Jim's take on the Omada ER7212PC 3-in-1 gigabit VPN router.
Okay, so first off, the stack doesn't actually have to be as complex as one of those videos on YouTube made it out to be. You absolutely can have VLANs and access control lists if you want to, but that is by no means a requirement. I almost never use VLANs in any of my network environments, and when I do, it's really got more to do with the wired stuff than the wireless, and you wind up having to port lock the VLAN tagging on switches so that anything plugged into a specific port will always be on that VLAN. Otherwise, it's complete kabuki and you're accomplishing nothing. So again, you don't need VLANs and ACLs. You can just set it up. It doesn't have to be much more complex than Deco. Yeah, you probably should install the controller if you don't want to just do, matching configurations on however many access points you buy. The controller makes it so that you don't have to set each AP up individually. But that's all you need is just the controller and the APs. If you don't want to stand up a controller, you can also buy their little hardware controller. It costs about, I think it's like $70 over here in the United States. You get a little metal chassis box. I have tested them for, power loss issues. Very unlike some competing products. They continue to work fine if you yank the power cord out of the back 10 times in a row in 10 minutes. It's good kit.
Yeah, so when I went to install it, I just put one in my office and plugged it into the PoE injector and into my switch, and put one in the living room and put one in the basement, and that was it. I bought the hardware controller, and that's runs in my laundry room where all the Ethernet ports in my house terminate to a punch-down block and so on. But yeah, I didn't do anything with ACLs. I did one setup with VLANs, but that's for me, and it was not required at all. And so yeah, I just plugged them into my existing network, and they backhaul over the wired network to each other, and that works great. And yeah, I didn't have to do any ACLs or any fancy config, and I bought the hardware controller just because I didn't want the Wi-Fi to depend on any of the servers in my home lab to run the virtualized version of the appliance. And so yeah, it sounds like it was just as easy as the Deco as far as setup goes, and you have a lot more control because, you have that on-site controller box or VM.
Yep.
Well, this seems like a good opportunity for me to give an update on my Apple issue that I had. So I've got these access points as well, and I haven't got a controller. I just used the web interface on 3 or 4 access points, just gave them all the same SSID and password, and it generally works fine, except for Apple devices. And it turns out that it was the MAC address randomization that was causing me the issues. So when I turned that off on the iPad, I've had no problem since. So I haven't needed to install the controller even.
That is great confirmation right there. I almost wish this was text so we had better ways of highlighting this for the future. But if you're having issues with your iPhones and your Wi-Fi devices, try disabling MAC randomization. It fixed Joe's issue. Okay, so back to Kanuni. The next question was about the Omada ER7212PC 3-in-1 gigabit VPN router. And the only thing I can really tell you about it is a thing. It's a thing that I'm interested in. I bought one, but I don't have enough experience with it yet to be able to either recommend it or not recommend it. It can be integrated into the Omada stack so that you can control it, from the same control interface that you would control the access points. I'm not yet sure to what degree because Have I mentioned I haven't really had a chance to test the thing yet? Ultimately, it is a wired-only router for a pretty decent price that might make a compelling alternative to consumer routers with built-in Wi-Fi. I suspect it will probably live longer than those do. The features that it offers, like, being able to do multi-WAN if you've got more than one ISP available, stuff like that, that's all pretty interesting. But I don't think it's going to be like a hardcore necessity for many people. I think that's more one of those things that, like, if you're hankering after an old school wired only, not too expensive, but decently performant router, that's worth giving a shot. But that's the most I can say about it so far.
I was curious about the VPN aspect of it, and it says it supports IPsec, OpenVPN, and some others that are not WireGuard, unfortunately.
That is unfortunately unsurprising. Keep in mind, however, that your router itself doesn't necessarily have to be a VPN terminator, particularly if you want to use WireGuard, which I believe Joe was heavily implying by noting the list of things that were supported. It's very easy to just port forward a single UDP port in to a machine on your network running WireGuard, and you set up a static route that routes everything destined for the tunnel subnet or for the remote subnet. If you're doing like a full-on site-to-site, you just route all that through the local machine that's running WireGuard, and poof, you've got a VPN into your entire network that works with everything. You don't need to install WireGuard on every single machine on the inside if you simply set up a static route and port forwarding. And you can do that with just about any router. Now, hilariously, one router that you can't do that with is I would not recommend trying with any of TP-Link's consumer-grade routers. I can't speak for all of them definitively, but I have absolutely tested the crap out of the static routing feature on the TP-Link Archer series of routers, which are very popular with residential types. They're very inexpensive. They perform a lot better than you would expect for their very low price tag, typically around $50. But the static routing feature on them does not work. And I can tell you from experience that reaching out to technical support will not help. They will argue with you that static routing can't work because of the way the Linux kernel works. And they won't notice if you tell them you're wrong about that, because actually I am doing exactly this with the Linux kernel on normal x86 64 machines, and it worked great. So yeah, if you want static routing, stay away from the TP-Link consumer routers, but I would absolutely expect everything to work properly on the professional grade router. I just don't know how great it is since I haven't had a chance to really use it yet.
But yeah, kind of to that point, and the earlier one with the YouTube video and the ACLs and so on, it doesn't have to be that complicated, right? I didn't replace my router when I set up my TP-Link Omada wireless. My existing router was fine, and so I just continued using it, and I just plugged the Omadas in, and I had much better Wi-Fi.
Well, Kanuni probably needs a router for the first time because they tried the Deco Mesh before, and Deco is both the router and your access points. One last thing before we get out. I hate that I can't give a concrete recommendation one way or another to that TP-Link ER7212 router. But if you're looking for a relatively inexpensive router that is very readily available, all the features work on it, and it performs quite well, I recommend Netgear's Nighthawk line of routers. You'll notice I said Nighthawk. If it doesn't say Nighthawk at the front, I don't necessarily recommend it. But everything they've released under that line has been quite performant and very featureful, and all the features work the way they should. They've been very reliable. I will say I don't think you need to waste the money on one of their... Netgear does have some ridiculous, like, $600 and up Nighthawk models. You don't need one of those. If all you want is just a router to sit in front of your network, grab like a $100 or $100.50 model, and it will be fine.
Right, well, we better get out of here then. Remember, show@2.5admins.com if you want to send any questions or your feedback. You can find me at joelrest.com/mastodon.
You can find me at mercenarysysadmin.com.
And I'm at Alan Jude.
We'll see you next week.